environment and ecosystem. We all know that drugs are basically essential for ensuring high standards of human health and well-being, and they're also used widely for veterinary applications in modern society. As we know that extensive and uncontrolled usage of different categories of drugs like antibiotics, analgesics, especially paracetamol and aspirin, that is being used extensively without any prescription of the doctor. Antipyretics, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, beta blockers, steroids, that is actually very threatening. And these drugs pose a great environmental and human health hazards when they're exposed to the environment, released into the environment, and get accumulated in the ecosystem. So people use these drugs extensively because of the lack of knowledge and because they're not aware of the quantities and the metabolites which enter into the environment, their active pharmaceutical ingredients, metabolic byproducts, and their persistence in the environment. So that is the reason we are continuously using without any prescription of the doctor. So we all know that our health is basically directly or indirectly affected by the pharmaceutical influence. Not only pharmaceutical affluence, like this is a category of different emerging pollutants in the environment. So pharmaceutical is making one important category of persistent organic pollutants into the environment. So we can see from the picture that categories of emerging pollutants are posing great threat to the environment and ecosystem, and of course, ultimately to the human health and the animals. So we can see that the perfluorinated compounds, polybrominated diphenyl ethers, flavor retardants, personal care products, that is again a very important class of emerging pollutant. Veterinary pharmaceuticals manufacture nanomaterials, gasoline additives, and lastly, the human pharmaceuticals, they are contributing to the category of potential emerging pollutants. And how these are accumulated, how these are released, you can see from the picture, they are going to leaching into the soil, finally to water. I mean, they are going into all environmental matrices, and finally to the animals, plants, and to the human beings. So they are very threatening. So we must understand the need to eradicate these pharmaceuticals and their metabolites from aquatic environment, and what are those techniques which should be used for the removal of these pollutants from the environment, and basically that should be green and sustainable. So this is all I have discussed. What is the release of pharmaceuticals, and the latest studies have predicted the possibilities. This is a very important point that latest studies have predicted the possibilities of related risks of brain disorders increase because of the paracetamol exposure. So paracetamol is the most commonly used like antipyretic medicine, and the latest studies are basically explaining the birth of newborn babies which are having this exposure of paracetamol before their birth, and they are having mental disorders like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and autistic children, they're also taking birth because of the overexposure, dosage when taken by the mother, pregnant lady. So there are many traditional treatment methods of wastewater which are not sufficient for the eradication of active pharmaceutical ingredients and the metabolites from the aquatic environment. Many advanced oxidation processes, they are also being used for the removal of these organic pollutants, but they're not sustainable because of the high energy consumption. They're not even economical. Operational cost is very high. Efficiency is low and lower efficacy. Therefore, we must switch over to those techniques, for example, bioremediation technique, which are highly efficient and economical as well. So before we go into the detail, we must understand the flow chart. What is the root and what is the fate of these active pharmaceutically active compounds into the environment and ecosystem. So we can see from the source that the pharmaceutical companies generate, different categories, different types of drugs, pharmaceuticals. So these drug products from the source of generation, they are going to consumption. After consumption, the waste is produced. When this waste is passing through the waste treatment and management system, and finally the remaining portion that is left behind, that is non-biodegradable waste, and that is finally disposed of. And after disposal, that is going to different environmental matrices. Second part, we can see that the drug products, they are going to two different types of channels, that is drug official sale and the unofficial sales. Unofficial sale is going for the other uses, and ultimately final the disposal is in different environmental matrices. And the official sale of the drugs is basically for two types: human usage and the veterinary usage. And the human usage, that is going for households and hospitals. From there, that is going for domestic wastewater and hospitals wastewater. Finally, veterinary wastewater, and all these kinds of water, they are passing through the wastewater treatment plants, sewage treatment plants, and coming out in the form of wastewater effluents. Finally, going into the water bodies, that is all kind of water, surface water, rivers, lakes, and ocean sites, contaminating the entire global water supply. And the second part is that is pharmaceutical waste, solid waste, along with the household solid waste, veterinary solid waste, and the hospital solid waste that is going to landfills. And landfill is, of course, the most undesirable type of the disposal of these waste. So from landfills, that is going to the soil surface and ultimately going to the groundwater. So we all must have this awareness that what is the root and what is the fate of these pharmaceutical compounds, and not only these pharmaceutical compounds, but other organic and inorganic that contaminants. So that is ultimately harming the environment, global environment. So what happens to the post-use disposal of pharmaceutical compounds? So after consumption, we are only, those people who are not have this idea of the metabolic byproducts, they are only bothered about the consumption. They are not even, we must understand after consumption, they are metabolized, they are re-released by the humans in the environment in the form of human excreta. And the degree of metabolism is basically dependent on the nature and the design of drugs. For that, I'll be discussing in my few further slides. So pharmaceuticals and the metabolites, they encounter various types of biotic and abiotic components. Biotic components like microbes and other components. And the abiotic components like the oxygen, free radicals, heat, and pressure. Where in the environment they are degraded further by the action of by the reaction to simple molecules. But complete degradation is not possible. So that is why the remaining portion is going in the form of contaminants. So the rate of degradation gives very important information to estimate, to help us to estimate the risk and to design the preventive action plans for preventing our globe from the further contamination with these contaminants. Though pharmaceutical companies are definitely, they're trying to design, they're designing the products of which are having high degree of degradation, but incomplete metabolism of these drugs lead to pharmaceutical contaminants in seaways, wastewater treatment plants, and the complete network. So microbial degradation is basically a pharmaceutical contaminants is minimum, and the significant part is absorbed into water bodies, and ultimately that is going to the potable water. So that is a threat which is completely that is threatening for the environment, ecosystem, humans, animals, and overall, I can say, on a globe. So after this small discussion, I can come to the conclusion, pharmaceuticals in the water, that is definitely a global concern. So like my research work is recently, like we are trying to find out those sustainable remediation techniques which can which can degrade these contaminants into simple substances without any further harm of the environment. And for that also, we are also conducting a survey, a cross-sectional survey for the among the young students of the age group 18 to 25 years. So what is the medication pattern which they are adopting? And what is the what is the reason for these people? Why they are giving emphasis on self-medication? That is another very big problem. Without prescription, we are using analgesics and antibiotics, and of course, the antipyretics also. So this is the risk assessment. First of all, once they are accumulated in the environment, so we have to assess the risk because of the accumulation of these pharmaceutical contaminants in environment, and what are the repercussions, what are the impact on the human health. So we can see that once these pharmaceutical compounds, the post-degradation products and the metabolites, when they are accumulated into the environment and ecosystem, they are definitely bringing the toxic effects in the form of their metabolites and byproducts. So that can lead to hypertension, very common problem, polluted surface water, disturbed marine life, not only humans, animals, but also the marine life is equally disturbed with the release of these contaminants into the water system, aquatic system. So loss of riverine microbial communities is also observed. The ecotoxicity, oxidative stress, which is a very common problem, polluted drinking water, behavioral disorder, which I've discussed just now. Recent studies have found out many cases where the children are, having since birth they're having behavioral disorders. So there are, though not none of the study has confirmed that there is a role of this particular medicine only, but yes, many chances are there that, it is coming to the conclusion that because of the behavioral disorders are basically because of the exposure of these different potential toxins that is in the form of contaminants in the environment, and pharmaceutical is one of that category. Carcinogenicity is another problem, and everything that is leading to environmental toxicity. So this is the small, the few lines which I have noted down for the threats of human exposure. So the major harm to humans come from the contamination of potable water. Of course, that is because ultimately all the contaminants are going to potable water, because the concentration, now it has been observed in many studies that the concentration of pharmaceutical products in drinking water has now reached to a higher level, that is nanogram per liter. And the long-term exposure may result to acute and the chronic damages like behavioral changes because the overdose, like I mentioned here, the hypertension, intrauterine paracetamol exposure, that is giving the oxidative stress and accumulation of tissues, and that may lead to cancerous diseases as well. So that is very threatening. So let's come to the aspect of ecotoxicological studies, ecotoxicity of pharmaceutical compounds. So toxicity studies are focused on studying the effect of the toxic nature of these pharmaceutical on different matrices like aquatic life forms, sediments, and the soil life forms. So it is found that these toxic compounds, they basically alter the growth patterns, reproduction patterns, and the survival abilities of these forms. And for these studies, the model organisms are basically chosen on the basis of their morphological characteristics, physiological characteristics, and ecological characteristics, which basically represent the large data sets. So in this particular case, zebrafish has been used as the model organism to study the human pathology, which is having the 70% of the human protein coding gene for diseases. That is why, so that can be correlated with the human study. These are the environmental risks of the pharmaceutical contaminants in the environment. The significant is basically in the form of different form of life on the land and water. And the major problem is that because these compounds, these pharmaceutical compounds, they are persistent in the environment. That is due to the release and the recalcitrant nature of these pharmaceutical compounds. Because recalcitrant is not easy to control. They are hard to degrade. They are hard to mineralize completely. From mineralization, I mean like the complete degradation into the non-toxic substances, that is CO2 and water maybe, or other substances which are not harmful for the environment and ecosystem. So these pharmaceuticals are very rigorous. They're very recalcitrant and of course bioactive as well. So bioactive nature that remain even after excretion, these remain biologically active after disposal. Here in this, when they are released, they can trigger unwanted effects on the non-target organism as well. So for these act as endocrine disruptors, which is very hazardous to the feminization to fish population. This is an overview of extensively used drug category like antibiotics, antihypertensives, antiepileptics, lipid regulators, and non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, for example, diclofenac. So I'll be discussing about their overview of the chemical structure, the metabolism, their removal via sewage treatment plants. So we can see the data which I've collected here. That is, first is ofloxacin, which is a commonly used antibiotic. The excretion rate is only 70%. And the total removal via the sewage treatment plants, the data is exactly not available. And the diclofenac, that comes in the category of non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, excretion rate is only 15%. And the total removal via standard sewage treatment plants is only 69%. Another is carbamazepine, that is antiepileptic, and similarly propanolol, that is high antihypertensive. The excretion rate is less than 1% unchanged, and the total removal is only 96%. Similarly, we can see the data for antiepileptic as well. Excretion rate is 1 to 2% unchanged, and the total removal is only 7%. Other sulfamethoxazole, which is an antibiotic, and we can see the data for lipid regulator as well, that is clofebric acid. So now, how can we detect? The detection is very important once they are released into the environment. So unless we detect, so how can we plan the strategy for the complete eradication of these pharmaceutical compounds? So detection is basically very challenging a task. So it involves 3 steps. Firstly, the extraction of analytes, and that is secondly, the detection of analyte, and lastly, the identification of these analytes. So the extraction is done through various techniques. Like the core idea is basically we have to isolate, we have to ionize, we have to detect, analyze, and identify and report it. And secondly, that is the detection is done with the help of MS3 technique, exchange method, solid phase extraction, and many other techniques also there, along with the chromatography and mass spectrometry. That is something which is related to laboratory. And identification is high performance liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry methods are used for the identification of these transformation products of these pharmaceutical compounds. Approaches of treatment are commonly used after detection and analysis. We have to find out those treatment techniques which are basically which can be used and which are already being used for the treatment of these the eradication and the removal of these compounds from the environmental matrices. So the commonly used treatments are like wastewater treatment plants, sewage treatment plants, which are old and inefficient in currently. Photodegradation of micropollutants by UV visible irradiation, that is another technique. And UV-based advanced oxidation processes, photocatalysis of micropollutants by UV and titanium oxide as a catalyst, and biodegradation techniques. We have already worked on this photocatalytic degradation of micropollutants, not only with the help of UV-based oxidation processes, but along with the nanotechnology, which we are working here in the laboratories. We are trying to develop the nanoparticles which can degrade these recalcitrant pollutants with high degree of degradation. So the current approaches of treatment, say the biological treatment approach, that is the activated sludge approach, which is the most commonly used wastewater treatment technology. And it is reported that the biological treatment systems, when they are used in combination with biodegradation and bioabsorption, that brings better results. They influence the removal of organic micropollutants to a greater extent. Physicochemical processes like which I've already discussed, that advanced oxidation processes, photocatalysis, membrane filtration, adsorption, etc., they are being used, but not successful. And other cones are also like they are associated with these techniques. So no strategy is successful for removal of these micropollutants from the biological systems completely. They are not ecosystem. These are the advanced oxidation processes which are continuously used. The homogeneous different types of processes I've taken a small account into like in my presentation. Homogeneous processes and heterogeneous processes. This is again the two kinds of using energy and without energy. That is it is like not to discuss. Biological treatment system, they have a wide variety of active microorganisms that is economical as well, and green technique as well, which can be used for the removal of wide range of chemical transformations. Many studies have reported that the removal of organic micropollutants basically occurs to different extent in biological treatment system when combined with the bioabsorption and biodegradation. Therefore, there is a need to implement these techniques on a pilot scale so that we can check the efficiency for the wastewater treatment, which are containing the active pharmaceutical ingredients and these pharmaceutical pollutants. This is the efficiency of the combination of these techniques along with the conventional methods, when they are combined with the bioremediation, they are bringing the results in the form of increased rate of bioremediation, and along with the that can be considered as a green technique for the remediation of environment. These are the challenges and the limitations which current treatment technologies for the removal of pharmaceutical ingredients. So I have discussed that advanced oxidation technologies like ozonation, activated granular carbon, UV radiation, membrane technology, etc. They are basically used with the relative success to remove these pharmaceutical compounds, pharmaceutically active compounds and other environmental contaminants from water. But different pharmaceutical compounds, their products, they have different categories like anti-epileptics, antibiotics, lipid regulators. They are having the quality, they are known to resist these treatment techniques, and because of their high solubility and poor degradable nature in water. So any kind of treatment which is applicable, which is applied for the removal of these different categories of pharmaceuticals, that is basically found to be not completely efficient, I can say, rather. They're not able to completely remove these pharmaceutical contaminants from the environment, to a greater efficiency. So we must switch on to other techniques. So these, how can we enhance the biological wastewater treatment, which is considered to be a safer and a greener technique? That is done with the help of there are three steps exploiting microbial diversity, exploiting metabolic diversity, and exploiting biocatalyst diversity. So firstly, the exploiting microbial diversity, here oxidative enzymes are used which are having great potential as biocatalysts for breakdown of these organic waste. The enzymes which are commonly used for the exploitation of exploiting this microbial diversity, that is cytochrome P450 and the lacases. Recently, I also published a paper on the efficiency of lacases as a biocatalyst for degradation of different categories of pollutants. The secondly is exploiting metabolic diversity. That is an alternative metabolic capability such as heterotrophic sulfate reduction, autotrophic sulfur oxidizing denitrification, anaerobic methane oxidation denitrification, and other techniques that could improve the micropollutant removal from the wastewaters. And the lastly is exploiting biocatalyst diversity. And since we all know that enzymes have a specific action, specialized, because every enzyme is having every enzyme cannot work everywhere. They have a specific site on which they can only work. So there are some categories of enzymes which are non-specialized enzymes. They are very promising biocatalysts for degradation of these kind of organic pollutants. And the important thing is that their non-specific nature only makes them very promising biocatalysts for the degradation of organic micropollutant. So these are the opportunities to reduce the input of pharmaceutical compounds into the environment. So what we believe that there are certain categories of the society of the global societies, and what are the possible measures and the activities that can be taken into account to, at least I believe that prevention is always better than cure. So how can we stop the release at the source itself, so that later on we have to put lesser efforts for the removal and for the eradication. So here comes the responsibilities of pharmacists, pharmaceutical companies, science and humanities, government authorities, and agencies. So firstly, the pharmacists, they must definitely, they must inform consumers to participate in take back system if appropriate. So because that is very important, because when the excessive amount of drugs are being distributed or they've being purchased, so there must be a system that excessive or the extra can be taken back to the system if that is appropriate. They have certain measures for that. Pharmaceutical companies, they must follow green and sustainable practices. They must publish reliable information and the environmental assessment. They must give the accurate, actually the data, how much the post impact can be threatening to the environment. So they must give the complete information. And before, at the time of delivering these medicines, they must offer suitable pack sizes. They must establish take back system when required, as and when required. And the science and humanities, they must begin research to ban compounds with green and sustainable pharmacy. There is a new concept which is coming these days, that is green and sustainable pharmacy. Regulation criteria for the assessment and the management of it. That is very important. We are only in the use of these and the effect of the drug, but they're not concerned about the post impact after the dispose of, after the excretion, and after the throwing of the waste. So how and what will be the impact on the environment of the particular, the throwing of these waste into the environment and ecosystem. And the government authorities and the agencies, they must also initiate communications related to the threshold for the active pharmaceutical ingredients and the different in different environmental areas and in drinking water. They must put a certain standard. They must establish a restrictive connection, and they must improve legislation for the management of outdated medicines. That is a very important criteria that should be implemented, and for the legal advice for the usage. That is also an important point. Since now this is the summary, I would like to summarize the complete presentation. And the pharmaceuticals, they are present as a mixtures in the environment on a global scale. They are transformed to other toxic byproducts. The metabolic byproducts are even more harmful than the actual pharmaceutical. So that is the thing which has to be taken into account. When they are released in the form of metabolic byproduct, they become even more harmful. Now, only knowledge is not sufficient. Only knowledge, we must be aware also. So we must, the knowledge of the fate and occurrence because of the long-term exposure is not sufficient, but the final risk assessment should also be there. We must be aware what are the final ultimate, the risk which can be setting to on a global level. So there is a lack of knowledge concerning pharmaceutical quantities and the metabolites entering the environment. And we are like, our surveys basically, like I discussed in my first slide. So we are giving emphasis on we have targeted a particular group of the students, particular young people from 19 to 25 years of age. So what are the reasons? What is their pattern of thinking, and why are they giving emphasis on the self-medication in spite of the prescribed usage of the drugs? So that questionnaire is based on, there more than 50 questions are based, so that will be a different outcome. And the different measures are a part of risk management and waste management. Different removal techniques are available there, but not able to completely eradicate these pollutants from the environment completely. Definitely, bioremediation techniques, they're not that efficient, but still they are lesser harmful, economical, and they have a better promising results for the bioremediation potential with regard to the removal of pharmaceuticals. Concluding, the pharmaceuticals are one of the major contributors level. I mean, the major contributor as active pollutant in different environmental matrices, along with the other categories of pollutants. And they are present in the form of metabolites and byproducts in the aquatic system, in water, air, and the land. And the current techniques are not that much efficient to degrade organic pollutants completely. And the pharmaceutical treatments are effective, but highly expensive, and the biological treatments are economical, but not that effective. So we have to come to those techniques which are in combination with these old techniques and the new techniques. So we must come on to the new developments where we can come to the conclusion that we must develop those techniques which are economical, green, sustainable as well. So the next stage of treatment could be the novel metabolic traits of unconventional microbe synthesis of enzymes which are capable of degrading micropollutants, and a move towards green and sustainable pharmacy. Along with the scientific treatment methods, we must not ignore the cultural aspects also to understand the minimal and the rational uses of drugs so that we can save our environment for the hazardous post effects. So this is the portion where the references from where I have taken my data. Thank you so much.